The hospital hallway still smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee when my phone buzzed. I had just finished a 12-hour ER shift. My scrubs were wrinkled. My feet throbbed inside shoes I'd been standing in since dawn. Dad's surgery was in 4 days. I opened the banking app while leaning against a vending machine, fluorescent lights humming above me. Balance, $0. I blinked, refreshed. Still zero. $26,000. Gone. When I walked into the waiting room, my sister was sitting there scrolling through her phone. I showed her the screen. She didn't even look surprised. She smirked and said, "Then just work more nights." 4 families sat nearby. A nurse glanced up. No one said a word. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just turned around and walked out, straight toward the private elevator that led to the VIP banking lounge downstairs. And that's when the man in the dark suit said quietly, "Ma'am, someone just committed federal fraud." The VIP banking lounge felt nothing like the ER. No alarms, no rushing footsteps, no fluorescent glare, soft carpet, muted lighting, the quiet hum of air conditioning instead of heart monitors. I stood there in wrinkled scrubs, dried blood on my sleeve that wasn't mine. The man in the dark suit introduced himself as Mr. Hale, Compliance Division. "Please sit," he said gently. I didn't. "How much?" he asked. 26,000, I replied. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "That was the full balance?" he confirmed. "Yes." He nodded slowly and turned the monitor toward me. There it was, a single wire transfer, authorized through verified credentials. Timestamp, 2:14 a.m. While I was in Trauma Bay 3, trying to stabilize a teenager who'd been hit by a drunk driver. Have you ever realized betrayal doesn't interrupt your schedule? It waits for you to be exhausted? The authorization code was entered correctly, he said. Device ID matches your shared account access. Shared. The word settled heavily. The account had 2 authorized users, me and my sister. We had opened it together 6 months earlier when Dad's diagnosis came back serious. A clean, practical decision. Shared responsibility. Or so I thought. "She has access?" Mr. Hale asked carefully. "Yes." "And who primarily manages the funds?" "I do," I answered. "I work, I deposit, I track." He nodded again. "We've already flagged this transfer," he said. "The receiving account triggered internal alerts. There are irregularities." Irregularities. A softer word for something deliberate. My phone vibrated in my hand, a text from my sister. "Don't make this dramatic. It's temporary." Temporary. I stared at that word for a long time. Temporary doesn't empty an account without warning. Temporary doesn't risk a surgery date. Wait, have you ever noticed how people downplay harm when they're not the one carrying it? "What happens now?" I asked. Mr. Hale folded his hands. "Because the transfer crossed state lines and appears to involve false representation, federal authorities are being notified." Federal. The word echoed. I wasn't thinking about charges, or headlines, or punishment. I was thinking about my father in a hospital bed upstairs, believing everything was handled, believing I had it under control. There I finally sat down. The chair felt softer than it should have. "What if I don't press charges?" I asked quietly. Mr. Hale's expression shifted slightly. "Ma'am, this may no longer be entirely your decision." That's when I understood something important. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't borrowing. This was structured, planned, executed at 2:14 a.m. when she knew I'd be too busy saving someone else's father to notice my own. Wait, have you ever felt the moment when the story changes from family tension to something colder? I stood up again. "I need the full report," I said. "For the FBI?" he asked. "For myself." Because before I confronted anyone, before I spoke a single word, I needed to understand exactly what she thought she could get away with, and why she believed I would simply work more nights. The bank printed 37 pages, transaction logs, IP addresses, device confirmations, authorization timestamps. I held the folder in both hands like it weighed more than paper. Because it did. It weighed trust. When I walked back upstairs to Dad's room, he was asleep. The heart monitor ticked steadily, a soft mechanical rhythm that reminded me how fragile timing can be. 4 days until surgery. 4 days until they would ask for final confirmation of funds. I stood beside his bed and adjusted his blanket. "Everything's handled," I whispered. I wasn't sure if I was reassuring him or myself. Have you ever promised stability while your own foundation was shaking? My sister was in the cafeteria when I found her. She was stirring sugar into her coffee slowly, like nothing urgent existed in the world. I placed the folder in front of her. She glanced at it. "You went to the bank?" she asked. "Yes." She sighed. Not guilty, just inconvenienced. "I told you it's temporary." "Temporary for what?" I asked calmly. She leaned back in her chair. "I needed to move money quickly. It'll come back." "Where did it go?" "Investment." The word sounded rehearsed. "What investment?" She hesitated, just for half a second. Have you ever learned more from a pause than from a sentence? "It's complicated," she said finally. "Dad's surgery isn't," I replied. That was the first time her expression shifted. "You're overreacting," she said. "You act like you're the only one who sacrifices. And I've done things too." "What things?" I asked quietly. Silence. Then the smirk. "You chose to work ER nights," she said. "That's not my fault." There it was. Resentment. Layered under convenience. Have you ever noticed how jealousy disguises itself as logic? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just opened the folder and turned it toward her. "Device ID matches your laptop," I said. "IP address traces back to your apartment." Her fingers tightened slightly around the coffee cup. "I told you, it's temporary." "Then why at 2:14 a.m.? She didn't answer that. Instead, she changed direction. "You think you're better than me because you're the one with the stable job." This wasn't about money anymore. It was about comparison. About years of silent competition I didn't know we were playing. "I never made it a competition," I said. That's easy to say when you're winning," she replied. Winning. Is that what she thought this was? Dad's illness, my overtime shifts, missed holidays. Have you ever realized someone else is measuring your life like a scoreboard? "Where is the money?" I asked again. She looked away this time. And that's when I understood something else. This wasn't an impulsive transfer. This was pressure, debt, something deeper. The phone in my pocket vibrated. Unknown number. And I stepped away from the table and answered. "Ma'am," a calm voice said, "this is Special Agent Ramirez. We need to discuss the receiving account." My sister's face went pale when she heard the name. And for the first time that day, she didn't smirk. Special Agent Ramirez met me in a quiet conference room inside the hospital administration wing. He didn't look intimidating, mid-40s, calm eyes, clean suit. But his presence shifted the air. "The receiving account is tied to an ongoing investigation," he said, placing a slim file on the table. "Multiple victims, structured transfers, promises of short-term returns. Investment fraud." My stomach tightened. "So she was scammed?" I asked. He paused. "Possibly, or she knowingly facilitated the transfer to cover personal liabilities." Liabilities. The word felt clinical. I thought about her new car last month, the sudden vacation photos, the designer bag she said was on sale. Have you ever replayed moments and seen them differently the second time? "She had access to the account?" he asked. "Yes." "And she transferred the funds without your consent?" "Yes." He nodded once. "Then, regardless of intent, this qualifies as federal wire fraud." The sentence landed quietly. Not dramatic, not loud, just factual. I felt something split inside me. Part of me wanted to protect her. She was my sister. We shared a childhood. I shared rooms, shared secrets. But another part of me was tired. Tired of being responsible. Tired of fixing. Have you ever reached the point where loyalty starts feeling like self-betrayal? What happens next? I asked. We freeze the receiving account. Attempt recovery. We interview her. Interview. That meant consequences. Not family tension. Legal ones. I stepped outside the conference room and saw her sitting at the end of the hallway. Smaller now. Less composed. She stood up quickly when she saw me. "What did they say?" she asked. I looked at her carefully. This wasn't the girl who smirked in the cafeteria. This was someone calculating damage. "They're investigating," I said simply. Her jaw tightened. "You wouldn't," she said. I didn't respond immediately. Wouldn't what? Tell the truth? Protect Dad's surgery? Protect myself? Have you ever noticed how people assume you'll stay quiet because you always have? "I didn't call them," I said. "Dear, the bank did." "That's not the point," she snapped. No, the point was that she moved $26,000 at 2:14 a.m. The point was that Dad's surgery depended on that money. The point was that she told me to work more nights. "I didn't think it would escalate," she said finally. Escalate, as if theft was supposed to stay manageable. I felt something shift permanently then. Not anger, distance. That evening, I sat alone in the hospital parking garage. The concrete pillars cast long shadows under the fluorescent lights. The air smelled faintly of oil and rain. My shift technically ended hours ago, but I hadn't left. I stared at the steering wheel and thought about childhood. 2 sisters sharing bunk beds, whispering late at night, promising to always have each other's backs. When did that promise become conditional? Have you ever realized that loyalty sometimes quietly expires? My phone buzzed again. Not my sister this time. My aunt. "I heard there's some misunderstanding," she texted. "Family shouldn't involve authorities." Misunderstanding. The word felt tired. No one asked how I felt. No one asked how Dad's surgery would proceed. They asked about damage control, about optics, about embarrassment. Have you ever noticed how quickly people protect reputation over responsibility? I didn't respond. Instead, I opened the surgery coordinator's email. Deposit deadline, 48 hours. Even if the bank froze the fraudulent account, recovery could take weeks. Dad didn't have weeks. I transferred emergency savings from my consulting fund. Money I'd set aside for a future home, down payment, stability, gone with 2 clicks. I didn't hesitate because, unlike my sister, I understood what urgency meant. Later that night, she came to the hospital again. She didn't sit near me this time. She stood. "You're making this worse than it needs to be," she said quietly. "How?" I asked. "It was an investment opportunity. They promised triple returns." "On Dad's surgery fund?" Silence. Her eyes dropped. "It was temporary," she repeated. That word again. Temporary trust, temporary ethics, temporary accountability. Have you ever realized that the word temporary can destroy permanent things? "I covered the surgery," I said. She looked up quickly. "You what?" "I transferred my savings." Her expression shifted. Not to gratitude, to discomfort. Maybe because now she owed more than money. She owed consequence. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Yes," I replied calmly. "I did. For Dad, not for her." She exhaled sharply. "You're always the responsible one," she muttered. That wasn't praise. It was accusation. And for the first time, I didn't try to soften it. "I didn't choose that role," I said. "You handed it to me." The hallway fell quiet between us. Somewhere down the corridor, a monitor beeped steadily, a life measured in rhythm. And something inside me settled. Not anger, not forgiveness, just clarity. Dad's surgery was scheduled for 7:30 a.m. The waiting room was quiet in that particular way hospitals get before sunrise. Dim lights, coffee machine humming, People pretending to scroll through their phones while counting seconds. I sat with the confirmation receipt on my lap, paid in full. My sister arrived 15 minutes late. She didn't sit beside me. She stood near the window, arms folded. Have you ever noticed how guilt changes posture? The surgeon came out briefly to confirm final details. I handled the paperwork, signed the forms, asked the necessary questions. My sister stayed silent. When the nurse wheeled Dad past us, he smiled weakly. "Everything ready?" he asked. "Yes," I said. My sister echoed, "Of course." And that's when I felt it, the boundary, because she could stand there and pretend contribution. But she hadn't carried it. Have you ever realized the difference between presence and responsibility? An hour later, Special Agent Ramirez called. "We've interviewed your sister," he said. I stepped outside into the early morning chill. And she admitted to transferring the funds, claimed she intended to repay within 30 days. 30 days. Dad had 4. There are also personal debts, he continued. High-interest loans. She appears to have been under financial pressure. Pressure. That explained urgency, not justification. "The funds are partially recoverable," he added, "but this will move forward legally." I leaned against the hospital wall. Partially recoverable. Meaning not fully. Meaning loss. Have you ever felt the weight of someone else's decisions land directly on your shoulders? "She says you're overreacting," the agent said gently. "That it's a family matter." Family. The word felt hollow. "It stopped being a family matter at 2:14 a.m., I replied. There was a pause. "I understand," he said. When I went back inside, my sister was waiting. "They're charging me," she said flatly. "Yes." "You could have stopped it." "No," I said calmly. "I didn't start it." Her eyes filled, not with tears, but frustration. "You've always needed to be right," she snapped. This wasn't about right. It was about safe. It was about protecting Dad. It was about protecting myself. Have you ever noticed how accountability feels like betrayal to the person facing it? The surgeon finally returned. "Procedure went well," he said. Relief washed over me so suddenly I had to sit down. Dad was stable. That mattered more than anything else. My sister looked at me differently then. Not superior, not resentful, smaller, because for the first time she understood something. I wasn't arguing. I was done absorbing damage. Dad was discharged 5 days later. He moved slowly, leaning on my arm as we walked to the car. Worse, the air outside felt cleaner than the hospital corridors. Brighter. My sister stood a few steps behind us. Quieter than usual. Have you ever noticed how consequences make people smaller? The investigation moved forward quietly. No dramatic headlines, no public scenes. Just paperwork, interviews, deadlines. She called me twice that week. I let it ring the first time. Answered the second. "They're offering a settlement," she said. Her voice didn't carry its usual edge. They want repayment and probation, no prison." "That's good," I replied. Silence. "You don't sound relieved," she said. "I'm focused on Dad," I answered. And I was. For years, I had balanced everything: bills, appointments, family peace. Now something had shifted. I wasn't balancing anymore. I was choosing. Have you ever realized that distance isn't always loud? Sometimes it's just less effort? I stopped explaining myself to extended family. Stopped defending my decision to cooperate with investigators. Stopped responding to messages that began with, "You could have handled it privately." Private handling is how patterns survive. Dad recovered slowly. He never asked about the money. He just held my hand one evening and said, "You've always been steady." Steady. Not dramatic. Not reactive. Steady. That word stayed with me. My sister avoided eye contact most days. But once, while Dad was asleep. She spoke. "I didn't think it would go this far," she said. I looked at her. "That's the problem," I replied quietly. She thought consequences were negotiable. I didn't. Have you ever felt the moment when you stop being someone's safety net? I didn't yell, I didn't lecture, I simply reduced access. Financially, emotionally, practically. Because protecting myself wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. And clarity feels lighter than resentment. 3 months later, the case was formally resolved. Restitution agreement, structured repayment, federal probation, no prison, but permanent record. My sister signed the documents without looking at me. For the first time in her life, someone else set the terms. Not me, not Dad, not family dynamics. The law. Have you ever noticed how accountability feels cold but clean? Dad recovered steadily. Physical therapy sessions, slow walks in the park, small victories. One afternoon, he asked gently, "You two all right?" I didn't answer immediately, because all right felt too simple. "We're adjusting," I said. And that was true. We weren't enemies. But we weren't the same either. Something fundamental had shifted. Trust, once cracked, doesn't grow back identical. It grows back informed. My sister started a second job, quietly. No complaints this time. No comparisons, no smirks. And one evening, she surprised me. "I'm sorry," she said. Not defensive, not strategic. Just simple. I studied her face. She looked tired, less polished, more honest. "I believed I'd always have time to fix things," she admitted. "I didn't think you'd ever let it escalate." There it was again, the assumption that I would absorb it. Have you ever realized people confuse your calm with weakness? "I didn't escalate," I said. "I stopped protecting what hurt me." She nodded slowly. That difference mattered. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just stood there in quiet understanding. Because forgiveness isn't always loud. Sometimes it's measured in boundaries that stay intact. I still work ER nights, but I don't carry everyone anymore. I separated finances permanently, created legal protections for Dad's care, put clear structures in place, not because I don't love her, but because love without structure invites repetition. Have you ever felt the relief of not being the only adult in the room anymore? The recovered funds came back in portions, not fully, but enough. Dad never knew the full story. He didn't need to. What he needed was stability. And stability doesn't require drama. It requires decisions. Looking back, the most shocking moment wasn't the FBI agent saying federal fraud. It wasn't the empty account. It was her saying, "Just work more nights." Because that sentence revealed something deeper. She believed my endurance had no limit. Now she knows it does. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever been the responsible one, the steady one, the quiet fixer, pause for a second. What boundaries have you delayed setting? Like this video if you believe calm strength is stronger than anger. And tell me below, would you have handled it privately? Or would you have walked into that VIP lounge too? Because sometimes the moment you stop absorbing damage is the moment everything changes.